U.S. Arab Radio Network is proud to offer the Ray Hanania Show with veteran journalist Ray Hanania, the U.S. correspondent for the Arab News newspaper. U.S. Arab Radio broadcasts content Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. on WNZK AM 690 in Detroit, WDMV 700 in Washington, D.C., and simulcast through stations around the country. Programs will rerun from 5 till 6 p.m. Visit us on Facebook at U.S. Arab Radio. And we're also streaming live on Facebook.com/Arab News.
And good morning, everybody. This is Ray Hanania here at the Ray Hanania Radio Show, sponsored by Arab News newspaper. It's Wednesday, August 25, 2021. It's 8 a.m. Eastern time. We got a great guest coming in here. I'm going to bring our guest on right now. He just joined us, Stephen Butler. By the way, we're going to be talking with two guests. First, Stephen Butler, who is the Asia Program Coordinator for the Committee to Protect Journalists. He's joining us now. He's worked as a journalist throughout Asia, writing for the Financial Times and the Christian Science Monitor from South Korea in the mid-1980s before joining the staff of the Financial Times and reporting in Southeast Asia, London, and Tokyo, including regular reporting visits to China. In segment 2, at the bottom of the hour, we're going to discuss the situation more broadly in Afghanistan with Arab News reporter Zahid Hussain, who recently wrote a detailed and lengthy spotlight on what's happening to the people there. Just terrible what's going on in Afghanistan. Welcome to the program, Stephen. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, a little technical issues there just before you got in, but, you know, nothing ever goes crazy. Listen, I was on your page at the Committee to Protect Journalists, and I saw that number at the very top when you go to Afghanistan. 55 journalists have been killed there, and just recently there were raids by the Taliban of 2 journalist homes. It doesn't give me confidence that things are going to go well. What kind of concerns does the Committee to Protect Journalists have?
You know, it's a very uncertain environment right now. And we don't really understand the degree to which there is coordination between the Taliban leadership, which says that it's in favor of free press, or whether they mean it. And then, you know, the Taliban on the ground. The Taliban have gone searching for certain journalists. They've gone through houses. The 2 cases you mentioned were just the most recent, and we've had others. We've had one incident where the Taliban knocked on the door and pushed their way in. The journalist escaped out the back, and they fired it. They were firing their weapons at him. So this is, you know, it's very concerning, and we just don't know how far that they're going to stay on this path, but it's very worrisome.
Is it journalists across the board, or are they targeting like local? I mean, I'm not going to say targeting, but does it seem the problem is more with local journalists as opposed to international journalists? Do we have a sense about what the concerns might be in terms of that?
You know, it's both. Well, when you say international journalists, they haven't been targeting, you know, foreigners, non-Afghans who've been sent in so much. There are journalists you know, from the outside, not very many, but they've continued to operate. Certainly, people who worked for foreign news outlets are in jeopardy. But the people who we are dealing with, you know, for the most part, are Afghans who work for Afghan news outlets, who often made, you know, critical reports on the Taliban. And they've been scrubbing their social media accounts, trying to get rid of that. But people remember, people know the history of some of these people. They're well known in Afghanistan.
And that's why I felt this segment was probably going to be the most important that we're doing, because it really tells you about someone or an organization, how they deal with the media. I mean, it's one thing to be upset about criticism. It's another thing to go and intimidate and bully. So it's hard. I mean, from my perspective, I'm very concerned about the Taliban being here in the U.S. You know, the 20th anniversary of September 11th, everything we've learned about the Taliban, everything we've been taught about the Taliban is disconcerting. Although there are people that have argued with me that, you know, this is a different group. They're going to be different. They're going to change. But I think I guess the canary in the coal mine is how they treat journalists. I mean, that's got going to be significant for us in terms of which direction this whole situation moves.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things to keep in mind is that Afghanistan has changed in these last 20 years, and the Taliban have been out in the countryside. The cities have grown a lot. They've become more modern. There's a modern media infrastructure. People are used to having access to news and entertainment that's provided by independent media outlets. I think it's encouraging to see that some of the biggest news, the Tolo news, which is maybe the most widely watched news source, they've allowed that to continue. And Tolo says they're continuing their news reporting just as they always have. There was a Taliban spokesperson who got on a live TV broadcast interviewed by a woman journalist. So
right.
There are certainly some positive signs. We just don't have a sense of, if the floodgates open for free media and the Taliban is subject to a lot of harsh criticism, which they deserve for sure, how are they going to react? How are they going to tolerate that, or are they going to try to clamp down on it? And it's, unfortunately, there are a lot of examples of other countries in the regions that are not tolerating the free press very much.
Right.
And so they have a lot of examples they can imitate.
Yeah, and I guess that the U.S. is still there. Although I know President Biden has said he wants everybody out by August 31st. It seems like he's really rushing. He wants to meet the deadline that he set. A lot of others in Europe are saying we should kind of take our time, but they're still under a cover. And if they're having these problems now, after August 31st, I mean, isn't there an even bigger concern? Or are these just individual incidents? Do you know what I mean? It's like you and I may know each other locally, and we represent different people. We have a difference of opinion. I start, bullying you, or you bully me. It may not be the Taliban per se, but it's possible that they're local like that. Is there any thought toward that at all, or it doesn't really matter? They should go out of their way to make sure journalists are safe regardless.
Yes, I mean, I think there are two questions. I mean, one, certainly there are local, journalists throughout the country who have, an unfriendly relationship with the Taliban, and there has been retaliation in those cases. But in many of the cases we're dealing with, these are prominent nationally known, journalists, and it's really not a question of some local, a Taliban leader, getting angry at some kind of report. These are obviously targeted. And that's not a good sign, because
right.
we have to believe that comes from somewhere higher up in the hierarchy of Taliban leadership.
And are you concerned about September 1st? Well, once the U.S. is out, it's such a major symbolic date, regardless of whether we can or can't do anything at this point to protect people. But that date's going to be like, okay, now it's your ball. How are you able to monitor people? I mean, does the Committee to Protect Journalists have people in Afghanistan now?
We don't have our own people there. We are in touch with people on the ground. I mean, I don't want to reveal too much of how we're operating there, but yes, we're in touch with people, and we should be able to continue monitoring. I mean, after the fact, although there was a rumor that the Taliban were going to shut down telecommunications, in which case that creates a major problem.
Yeah. Well, and can you tell us about any of the incidents that we know about, that we're aware of harassment? I mean, how serious have they been? Obviously, bullying and intimidation is serious, but at what level have these incidents taken place?
I'll give you an example. There were two women journalists, it turns out, in a safe house in Taliban in Kabul. They emerged from that safe house, and they were immediately recognized on the street by some local Taliban guards who called after them, and they ran away. And they don't have any place to go. I mean, I think we were able to get them into a hotel finally, but they couldn't go back to that safe house. And they called out their names, not only their names, but other people on their news crew. So this is, it's pretty serious. If they had not got away, what would have happened to them? We don't really know.
Right. This is it's very worrisome over there. And I'm looking at your report. For our listeners, again, I just want to remind them that we're talking with Stephen Butler, who is the Asia program coordinator for the Committee to Protect Journalists. And we're talking about the situation in Afghanistan. There have been a number of events that have been worrisome. And on their website at cpj.org, you can look up Afghanistan, and they have a report about the Taliban taking 2 female state TV anchors off the air, that they beat 2 journalists. The CPJ has urged the G7, correct, to protect and evacuate journalists and media workers in Afghanistan. Has there been any effort to, have you seen an effort to, from anybody to protect the journalists? I mean, other than statements from your organization and a few others?
We are getting journalists out. It's the numbers are small. We're cooperating with some diplomatic missions on the ground, and they have successfully been able to get people to the airport and out. The numbers are much smaller than we would like to see at this point. We're still hopeful, even in these last couple of days, if that's all that's left in the U.S. evacuation, we're still hopeful that we can get many more out. I think after the U.S. leaves too, I wouldn't say that the door is closed on journalists escaping. I mean, and one of the reasons I say that is, neighboring Pakistan has actually been quite open about providing visas and welcoming journalists who have to leave. This is, it's a very, very positive thing. How they get there is another question. Pakistan International Airways, they have canceled some flight this week, but they do have a regular relationship. And there are the overland routes, which are not terribly safe, but it nonetheless provides a way for journalists to escape somehow.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like anybody really had much effort to plan anything. I know that we have an American that's still being held by the Taliban. Frericks, I think, is his name, and we only have a few days to get him out. Once we're out, it's going to be 10 times harder to help people. And I certainly don't want to reveal any of the techniques and things that you're doing, because I think it's very admirable. I mean, this is a very fluid situation. We hope that the Taliban is going to live up to its promises. And maybe find a place in the world order where they can have a role. But how they treat journalists, as you note, is a significant barometer of what the future is going to be.
No, absolutely. I think that, the Taliban need international help. They need international financial flows. And the only way they're going to do that is by, achieving some degree of legitimacy, including working with, the former government officials and having some minimal standards of human rights.
And as far as do the Taliban have their own media? I mean, we know they have a spokesperson, which is kind of a first that I've seen. But do we know if they have their own media? And have you been in touch with any of their own media reporters and journalists?
Well, what they've done in the provinces, not in Kabul, as far as I'm aware, is they've taken over some of the radio stations and kicked out, the previous people and put in their own. But we have not had direct contact with them.
You haven't. I mean, that's disconcerting too. I mean, going in, changing these stations. I don't know how you managed to. It seems like it's a lot worse than just a few incidents. Oh yeah, no. This is numbers out of date, but at least 50, news operations have been shut down across the country in the provinces. Do you think it's a concern? I mean, do you think it's an effort to be cautious on the part of some of the journalists and news organizations, or have they actually been shut down by the Taliban?
I think it's both. Some of the journalists, they see it coming and they flee. They go into hiding, and because they don't want their head to be on the chopping block, because nobody really knows. The Taliban has a history of brutality, and many journalists have been assassinated, over these past few years. So there's a high level of distrust.
If you had a message for journalists in Afghanistan, what would it be?
Be careful.
Yeah, I know.
Watch your back. look at our website. We have a lot of safety and security information that's available there. Take a look at it. And
have journalists reached out to you, to the CPPJ and other organizations asking for help?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
have you gotten a lot?
It's in the thousands of requests for help.
I mean, we're talking about Afghanistan, 1,000.
Thousands. The media industry was one of the great successes of the last 20 years. You cannot say they created a successful democracy, but there was a thriving media industry, and profitable too. And Afghans, they lapped it up.
So there was a diversity in thought and discussion, and during the past 20 years, was there a point where it was like hard to believe that things were going so well in terms of the news media? Was it really that good? I mean, I didn't see it, often, obviously here in the U.S., but was it really a stable situation, a professional operation then?
Very much so. There was a lot of international aid money from private foundations and from the U.S. government, USAID programs that trained journalists, that provided seed money, and this just took off. That's what, when I said earlier in the program that Afghanistan has changed. And that's something the Taliban, they're going to have to deal with it somehow. It's not the same country that they tried to rule, 20, 30 years ago.
Right. I mean, if they want to be accepted, the media, our job as journalists, and, I'm not really so much a journalist as much as I am a opinion commentator now. And I do some limited writing for Arab News newspaper, but our job is to bring up the issues and let society and government figure it out, and at least with some confidence. And it sounds like the media in Afghanistan was doing that, for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at even today, you look at the news website, the Tolo News website, you can see this is good journalism. Actually, they learned the trade. They learned that you had to have facts, that you need to have balanced stories. This is a great success, actually.
And I know you've been in journalism a long time. Had you ever seen an area where journalism actually started sprouting like a new plant in an area, and then it just kind of explode into a forest of? Because from what you're saying, there was a lot of professional journalism going on there.
I wouldn't say it's a completely isolated case. If you look at what happened in South Korea or Taiwan. And certainly there's some of that there, and in other places in Asia that some of it unfortunately has been snuffed out. But it is remarkable, certainly what has happened in Afghanistan.
And I know you only have a few minutes to actually stay with us, but is there anything else that you want to point out? Any other incidents that you want to share? I want the public to understand, how serious this is. Of all the things going on over there, I think this is the one thing. It's one thing to criticize journalists. I get it all the time. It's not a problem. I dish it out. I get it. That's part of the game. It's another thing to intimidate or bully or even cross that line and engage in some type of, physical violence or retribution. Has the line been crossed significantly, or is this kind of like a feeling of things being pushed over the line, and maybe there's still a chance to prevent it from getting worse? What's your sense?
Well, I'll tell you, in the morning I get up and we have this inbox, and it's filled with journalists saying, "Please help me. They're going to kill me if you don't help me get out." And it's really hard to read through it, to be honest. We just hope and pray that those fears are well founded, but we hope and pray that it turns out that, the Taliban leaders, mean what they say when they say they want to have a free press. It's tough, frankly. And the whole CPJ staff, we have expanded. We've actually brought in new people to work on this because we get so many appeals. It's emotionally a very difficult thing.
I couldn't imagine how you can handle that. Have you, when we talk about the, evacuation of Kabul and Afghanistan under the U.S. evacuation, is there a component for journalists that's taking place with them, or is this done individually? Do you know what I mean? Is the U.S. Has the U.S. government made that a priority too to help these journalists?
Yes, although it's very complicated. As you've seen, I think we now know that journalists from the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal are ending up in Mexico because Mexico has a more open door policy toward people seeking refuge. We've been providing information to the U.S. government about journalists who we think should be granted entry, and they seemed very cooperative, but it hasn't happened yet. It still could happen.
All right, listen, Stephen, first of all, my hat goes off to the Committee to Protect Journalists. You guys do a great job. I don't know how, I don't know if I could handle getting so many emails as you're sharing with us from people seeking help, because we know how serious that is. And I don't want to minimize that. That's very troubling. And, we just hope everything turns out well. I want to thank my guest, Stephen Butler, who is the Asia Program Coordinator for the Committee to Protect Journalists. Any final last minute thoughts or anything you wanted to mention before we say thank you and sign off?
No, I would just say that, get your congressmen, get your senators, call the White House, say this is important. If the U.S. government is serious, or if President Biden is serious about democracy around the world, this is an absolutely critical issue.
It would make a big difference if the president brought this up, correct? I mean, on the national forum that he has. Yes,
it would.
All right, Stephen, listen, Stephen Butler, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you. My pleasure.
I appreciate it. My guest, Stephen Butler, Asia Program Coordinator for the Committee to Protect Journalists. And their website is cpj.org. I'm Ray Hanania. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk with another journalist, Arab news reporter Zahid Hussain, who recently wrote a detailed and lengthy spotlight on what's happening to the people in Afghanistan. It was very fascinating. So we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back with our next guest right after these messages.
ArabNews.com, bringing you breaking news from across the Middle East and the latest on Arabs in America. Get inside the latest headlines with expert analysis and insights at ArabNews.com. Join over 5 million Facebook fans and over 10 million monthly readers. ArabNews.com, news that matters to you. Get ready for an amazing experience at Ishtar Restaurant on 15 Mile Road in Sterling Heights. Enjoy excellent hospitality from owners Ali Al-Baghdadi and Fatty Bonham, serving the best in Mediterranean food. Try Chef Ali Al-Baghdadi's famous shawarma, the best Iraqi grills and food, and the best Arabic and international dishes. Dine in our authentic atmosphere or take out. Call 586-698-2585 or check us out on Facebook. Ishtar Restaurant practices all CDC guidelines and is open every day, 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Have an amazing experience today at Ishtar Restaurant, 3625 15 Mile Road, Sterling Heights.
Imagine you're on a train track. Somewhere miles away, a train is headed your way. You can't see it yet, but it's coming. Slowly but surely. If you have prediabetes or you're at risk for type 2 diabetes, you may be on the wrong track, and diabetes could be heading your way. Bit by bit, the danger is getting closer and closer. So should you stay on the track you're on now or move to make a change and reduce your risk? If you have prediabetes or you're at risk for type 2 diabetes, you may qualify for the National Diabetes Prevention Program in your local community. This one-year program could be the ongoing support you need to put you on the right track. Not only did participants lose weight, they cut their risk of type 2 diabetes in half. Ready to get on board for a healthier future? Learn more about the National Diabetes Prevention Program and what else you can do to manage and prevent diabetes at michigan.gov/diabetes. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
The U.S. Arab Radio Network is proud to offer the Ray Hanania Show with veteran journalist Ray Hanania, the U.S. correspondent for the Arab News newspaper. U.S. Arab Radio broadcasts content Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. on WNZK AM 690 in Detroit, WDMV 700 in Washington, D.C., and simulcast through stations around the country. Programs will rerun from 5 till 6 p.m. Visit us on Facebook at U.S. Arab Radio, and we're also streaming live on Facebook.com/Arab News.
Welcome back to the Ray Hanania Show. I'm Ray Hanania here at WNZK AM 690 Radio and WDMV AM 700 Radio, broadcasting in Detroit and Washington, D.C. on the U.S. Arab Radio Network, and also at Arab News Facebook page at facebook.com/Arab News. We were just talking with Stephen Butler, the Asia program coordinator for the Committee to Protect Journalists, about the threats facing journalists in Afghanistan, and they seem to be ramping up. And President Biden has said that we're out of here. He's not going to extend the deadline. He wants everything out by August 31st. I don't know how he's going to be able to do that, but we have a great journalist on the line with us right now. He wrote this phenomenal, very detailed spotlight on what's happening in Afghanistan. Zahid Hussain, who is with Arab News. Zahid, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Ray, for having me.
We're honored to have you. I know Zahid is an award-winning journalist and author, a former scholar at the Woodrow Wilson Centre, and a visiting fellow at Wolfson College at the University of Cambridge and at the Stimson Center in D.C. He is the author of Frontline Pakistan, The Struggle with Militant Islam, and The Scorpion's Tail, The Relentless Rise of Islamic Militants in Pakistan. Frontline Pakistan was the book of the year in 2007 by the Wall Street Journal, and his latest book, No Win War, was published this year. Zahid, what is going on from your perspective in Afghanistan? How serious is it? How bad is it? After August 31st, what are we going to expect?
Well, actually, it's a very chaotic situation. It's largely because the way the Americans have decided to leave Afghanistan. So that is one of the major reasons for the chaos. The other thing is that it was expected or was foretold that ultimately Taliban would be able to take over Afghanistan. But nobody expected things to move that fast. Well, people were anticipating that there will be resistance from the one national army, and it will not collapse like this. In fact, actually, we were all of the opinion that it may go on for a very long time, and there was a danger of Afghanistan plunging into yet another round of civil war. But whatever happened was unimaginable. If within 11 days they were there in Kabul, and they just walked into Kabul. So obviously it caught everyone by surprise, and that's one of the reasons why this chaos is.
And we're hearing these confusing and conflicting reports. On the one hand, we saw the spokesperson for the Taliban. Just being a spokesperson for the Taliban doing a media conference was a first. And it suggested maybe they were going to move in the right direction. It's encouraged a lot of people what they said. But then on the other hand, in the other direction, we're getting reports of individuals, especially journalists, being harassed and bullied and, being threatened. And with the Committee to Protect Journalists just telling us that thousands of journalists and writers are begging, for help to get out of the country. You think that's because this all happened so quickly and this is the confusion that we should expect, that it may settle down? Is there any indication that it's going to settle down in a positive way, or do you see this getting worse? I mean, you're on the ground there. What do you think?
Well, actually, I think Ray, the real problem is certainly the way the things have moved so far. That is one of the major reasons for the current chaos. But on the other hand, the very fact that Taliban are now in control of Afghanistan, it revives the memory of the old past regime of Taliban way back in 1990s, when they imposed a very harsh regressive rule in Afghanistan. And particularly for women, it was a very hard thing to hardship period. They were banned from working. They were supposed to be in burqa. There was actually no access to education. And same thing actually at that point, it was such a regressive administration that even TV was not allowed. And every man was required to have certain size of beard. So those memories have come up. But it's 20 years now have passed since the Taliban government was toppled. And what we are witnessing at the moment is that one message is coming from the leadership of Taliban, and that sound very rational, and one could understand that present leadership of Taliban has a much greater exposure of the world situation. They have been living outside the country for a very long time, and also they have been meeting the other leaders of the house, and so they all know that it is not possible to go back to the history and have the same kind of regime as they had actually in 1919. So what we are hearing from them is a very rational message that Taliban will not stop women from working, their human rights will be protected. And some of the things we have also witnessed that for the first time, televisions is allowed there. Woman anchor was interviewing Taliban leader. Those were very good optics. But the problem is much more deeper there. The problem is that whether the commanders on the ground who had been trained in certain worldview, will they be amenable to change? And that's what exactly is happening. That on the one side, we've been assured by the Taliban leaders that things will improve, and they know actually how to run the government in a modern era. But on the other hand, we still don't know that it will be acceptable to the rank and file. So it is, and that's what actually we heard from one of the spokesperson of Taliban yesterday, that they need to first discipline their own ranks, then actually move forward. So that's one of the reasons for confusion.
Yeah, and that's encouraging to hear that, because I can understand the confusion and all the things happening so quickly. Nobody was prepared, not even the Taliban. I mean, really, in terms of, you would think that there would have been a more coordinated plan to help the Taliban, come into government and run the government, get the rank and file in line, get everybody structured. I mean, to run a government isn't, you don't just get in front of a microphone and say, we're going to do this. And I can imagine in individual cases where the rank and file members of the Taliban might be doing things on their own, because I'll tell you honestly, in the last 20 years, all I know of the Taliban as an American and a journalist and writer is that the Taliban were bad and now they're okay. And we hope that they become good. There's no middle ground that ever prepared me or the public to say they may return, to power. Nobody ever told us that. There was no message like that to the public. So it is a big shock. And I'm wondering, is the Taliban reacting to that shock? Is it just disarray, or is it, just let's kind of look good until we have complete control and then do whatever we want? Should we be afraid at this moment, do you think?
Well, Ray, I think that's, yes, you're right, actually, that the way things move, it also came as a surprise to Taliban. They never expected that they will just walk into Kabul and take over the reins of the government. And I think probably that's largely to be blamed President Ghani. Like, it seems actually that the Afghan army was supposed to be very well trained. They were trained and equipped by the Americans. 200,000, more than 200,000 force is not a joke actually. And also they had the best weaponry with them, and no resistance at all. Kabul was taken without a fire. And in fact, actually, what Taliban were expecting, they had decided to not enter the capital and wait for some kind of interim government to be. So when everything fell so into the now it seems actually they are not fully in control of the situation yet. And I think probably it could happen to any government, I would say, leave aside the Taliban, but and they are just actually trying to get to grip the situation, and so this kind of chaos is inevitable. But no, but saying all that, the Taliban leadership also understand, there's an international compulsion. There is, well, actually, as an organization, as one of the major force in Afghanistan, Taliban were recognized by the world. In fact, actually, when Americans were talking to Taliban, it means they had legitimized that. In fact, actually, they had also, have realized or understood that future they would have to deal with the Taliban because, but now, and they also, Taliban also understand they have been visiting different capitals of the world, and the message is the same all over, whether they have gone to China, Russia, even meeting American delegates in Doha. They had also gone to Iran. They have an old relationship with Pakistan. So all the message is the same. Well, there has to be an inclusive government. And you cannot run the way you run the regime way back in 1990s. You have to protect the rights of women. So all that they know. And the other thing is very important is that there's also some kind of understanding that they cannot live in isolation, isolated from the world. Economic situation is pretty bad there, and how can they survive? So all those factors are there. So I think probably what we will see what happens next few weeks. They are talking with other Afghan leaders. That's a quite change from and break from the past. In the past, they always believed that there used to be some kind of authoritarian regime by Taliban. No other political party or figures were allowed in. But now they're at least showing some kind of compromise. But on the other hand, there's also contradiction. On the one hand, they are actually talking to other Afghan leaders, but on the other hand, they also, have announced to restore the Islamic Emirates. Maybe actually for time being, but they all have Taliban have got clear message from all over, from the regional countries particularly, who had been sympathetic to them, like China, Russia, Iran, that Islamic Emirates is not acceptable. So that means actually they need to have some kind of pluralistic system of government. How do they do it is still to be seen.
Have you talked to any of the former Afghan officials? I mean, it just seemed like normally you would think that they might be there, the U.S. would leave, and they'd say, okay, let's all come together. Let's maybe have an election. Let's try to form a government, maybe a national, coalition together where everybody comes together. Is there any talk about any elections? Or, we're talking about a group that's just taken over the country. It's not like there's a question of who's going to be running Afghanistan. Do the people have any choice? And maybe we're going to take a break in a minute, and we can talk about what you sense, from the people, their fear or confidence or whatever. But it seems like this is a done deal. The Taliban's in charge. Are there going to be any elections? Has there even been a hint that, oh yeah, now that we're going to take over, we're going to have an election to make sure that Afghanistan is represented properly? They're not going to be elections, are there?
No, I think nobody is thinking of election at the moment. What I would call this original sin was the way the Doha agreement was signed with Americans and that. And it seemed that Americans were hurried and leaving there. Obviously, they had to leave. But there should have been there should be emphasis or stress on intra-Afghan talks, which should have led to some kind of political settlement. That would have been an ideal situation. Doha talks, yes, actually that continued for 6 months. I'm talking about intra-Afghan talks. But there were so many obstacles in the way because one has to also to blame Ghani government. They showed no flexibility. And I think probably that was, that was the major problem, that had there been any agreement between the two sides, Taliban and the Afghan government or republic, whatever you call it, then I think situation would have not gone that bad, and there could have been an interim government. Now, at the moment, I think probably everybody agrees, every country, that there is no way actually elections could be held in Afghanistan. What everybody or the countries, particularly neighboring regional countries, are emphasizing, and I think probably Taliban also understand, that there should be some kind of interim arrangement for next for 2 years or 3 years, because the situation in the country, like we all know, for 20 years the war had been going. In fact, actually, the war has been going in Afghanistan for not 20 years, but 40 years.
Yeah.
So in a way, actually, this is not the country where you can, anyway, after all that, the war, you could just hold election. That's not possible at all. And I think probably the best scenario could be that Taliban with other Afghan leaders or other section representative of Afghan population should come together and form some kind of national government. Obviously, Taliban will have a dominant position. And I think probably that is the best scenario possible, but we should not expect the elections to be held.
Yeah, this whole thing, honestly, to me is very disturbing. I mean, especially the U.S. has invested so much in Afghanistan to see all this just collapse. You know, maybe the changeover we can deal with, but there's absolutely no sense of where this is going to go. And I wonder, and maybe we're going to take a quick break here, but after the break, maybe you can help us share with us any thoughts or conversations you've had with people in Afghanistan, leaders in the region over there, as to who's to blame, who dropped the ball, how could you just walk out and leave this thing in disarray that was so important to us, over the last 20 years in the West. I'm Ray Hanania. We are talking with Zahid Hussain, who is an Arab News reporter who did a phenomenal spotlight recently in Arab News, and you can visit that at arabnews.com. Zahid did a spotlight on what's happening in Afghanistan, and we're speaking with him here at the Ray Hanania radio show, sponsored by Arab News newspaper on the U.S. Arab Radio Network. We're broadcasting in Detroit on WNZK AM 690 radio and in Washington, D.C. on WDMV AM 700 radio. And we're streaming live on Facebook.com/Arab News. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to continue the discussion with our distinguished guest and reporter at Arab News, Zahid Hussain. I'm Ray Hanania. We will be right back right after these messages.
ArabNews.com, bringing you breaking news from across the Middle East and the latest on Arabs in America. Get inside the latest headlines with expert analysis and insights at ArabNews.com. Join over 5 million Facebook fans and over 10 million monthly readers. ArabNews.com, news that matters to you.
Enjoy the first Syrian-style cuisine in Michigan. At Damas Cuisine and Catering, you'll find a wide selection of Syrian foods and sweets in our menu, like frikeh, hoisin, grape leaves with steak, mashawi platter, hot mahashi, char-grilled kebab, shawarma, and much more. Get super fast delivery from Damas Cuisine and Catering right to your door. Order online at damascuisine.com/menu and track your order live. Damas Cuisine and Catering, 28841 Orchard Lake Road in Farmington Hills. Call 248-987-4985.
Are you going to start a restaurant or grocery store soon? Do you need floor plans and designs? Call Najee Abood at 734-744-9796. Do you want to buy kitchen and restaurant equipment at discount prices? Call Najee Abood now, 734-744-9796. New Concept Products and Design, the trademark of kitchen equipment. 5% discount on all purchases of $75,000 or more. New Concept Products and Design, new location, 31185 Schoolcraft in Livonia. Learn more at www.newconceptproducts.com. Call Najee Abood, 734-744-9796.
U.S. Arab Radio Network is proud to offer the Ray Hanania Show with veteran journalist Ray Hanania, the U.S. correspondent for the Arab News newspaper. U.S. Arab Radio broadcasts content Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. on WNZK AM 690 in Detroit, WDMV 700 in Washington, D.C., and simulcast through stations around the country. Programs will rerun from 5 till 6 p.m. Visit us on Facebook at U.S. Arab Radio, and we're also streaming live on Facebook.com/Arab News.
And welcome back to the Ray Hanania Show here at the U.S. Arab Radio Network, brought to you by Arab News newspaper. I'm Ray Hanania. With me online on Zoom, streaming on the Arab News Facebook page at Facebook.com/Arab News, is my guest, Zahid Hussain. He is an Arab News reporter covering that region, Afghanistan, Pakistan, that whole area. And we were kind of getting some information from him on what's happening over there. I know it's so confusing to a lot of people here in the U.S. and in the Middle East. Things have happened so quickly. And I know President Biden has said the U.S. is going to be out of there August 31st, which is like 6 days. And there's a mad rush to get people out of there because of fear that exists over there. Zahid, is there fear? Do you sense when you talk to people, is it fear of the unknown or fear of believing that the Taliban is what they used to be, that maybe they haven't changed?
Well, a little correction, Ray. I'm columnist for Arab News.
Oh, sorry. I apologize.
So,
columnist, and there's a difference. You're right. I'm a columnist that's an opinion writer.
That's right.
But that's why we love to have you on here today, because your opinion means so much. You've had so many years in journalism, and to be able to share those opinions with the rest of us is a great thing. What is the sense of people there? What are they telling you?
Well, actually,
what are you hearing?
This is basically a kind of uncertainty which has gripped the city or gripped Afghanistan, and uncertainty in various ways. Particularly, we see those people actually who were desperate to leave Afghanistan, who had in some way or others actually had worked with the coalition forces, and also had worked with the government. So there is uncertainty about what's going to happen. And although Taliban have reassured that there will be general amnesty and nobody will be victimized for whatever they did, but basically kind of panic at the moment. And I think probably to some extent it is basically the way Americans are trying to leave that has also added to the chaos and uncertainty. So people were thinking, or when they saw that everybody who could reach the airport will be allowed to leave the country. So I think that's one of the reasons. And I think that what we see in Kabul may not be seen in other parts of the country. That's the situation maybe actually there may be uncertainty, but not actually that kind of chaos we see. So that is the situation at the moment. So this is more of a fear of unknown and what the Taliban dispensation would look like. So that is much more of a thing. I think the Taliban are trying hard to assure them that they're not going back to that old era of regressive system. But I think probably it will take some time, even if they show some sincerity. Also, actually, there's a difference in different or various parts of Afghanistan. When we see actually northern Afghanistan, the things are much more, relaxed there, and people the girls have started going to school because North has always been kind of more liberal than actually South and Eastern Afghanistan that way. So in Eastern Afghanistan, particularly, if you see the situation or the social condition, seems actually they're living in the old ways. Actually, there's a huge gap in Afghanistan, socially, culturally, between the rural Afghanistan and urban Afghanistan. So all those sectors, and the Taliban were believed to be coming from mostly from the rural sector. So that's basically going to be seen that whether they will accept this kind of change.
Has there been any role or involvement of Pakistan to help in this situation? I know the U.S. is concerned about getting out of there, but that region is going to be left with whatever happens, and whatever happens could have a significant impact on Pakistan. What's happening with that between Pakistan and Afghanistan?
Well, actually, Ray, as we know, actually, that they have about 2,500 long border, Afghanistan and Pakistan, and there is a ethnic proximity. Both sides, the same people live on both sides of the border, Pashtun speaking. So I think probably that's what I'm saying, that whatever happened in Afghanistan will have a direct bearing on Pakistan, which is such a huge border. So Pakistan has been involved in Afghanistan situation for a very long time. It has been an ally of United States in this so-called war on terror, although there has been, the relationship has never been smooth despite all that.
Right.
There was a little convergence of interest between the two countries when it came to policy in Afghanistan. They cooperated very well, actually, when it came to countering Al-Qaeda. But basically, Pakistan had a huge reservation on American policy or American strategy in fighting war in Afghanistan. So now, but there is still convergence of interest between the United States and Pakistan, that somehow the situation should be stabilized there. And in this present situation, since Pakistan is so close, like the closest country, there has been people have been airlifted from there by Pakistan International Airlines plane, mostly actually from international, multilateral agencies, and also some diplomats. But not, but basically it is so enormous and massive problem in Canada that actually there's always a limitation to what that country can do. But not the latest development, if you might have heard about it, is that now Taliban are stopping they are allowing the foreigners to leave. They are allowing actually those people who had foreign passport to be airlifted. But now they have put certain kind of restriction on Afghans trying to leave the country.
So they're allowing foreigners to leave, but they're not allowing any Afghanis to leave.
This is the most recent. It did not happen for last 7-8 days, but now actually from today I heard that they have put up restriction, and they have asked Americans not to actually take out all the Afghans who are educated, because it will leave Afghanistan completely a desert, intellectual desert. They would not have people even to work in.
This is so troubling, Zahid, when we hear these stories. And again, it's the way that everything happened. Because there is a sense, isn't there, among people that the Taliban could become a respectful member government of the United Nations representing Afghanistan, and that they will follow the, international norms and respect journalists and respect people's rights. There's an expectation that could happen. And I think deep down, everybody wants that to happen. Do you think that's going to happen, given what you're seeing, or is it hard to say?
It is very difficult for an insurgent group which had been fighting for 20 years, and suddenly they find themselves in this different role and trying to govern a country which is basically so divided and war ravaged. So I think probably that is also one of the reasons. The second thing, obviously the fighters who had been there for so long, the commanders on the ground, they basically feel that they were not only fighting of foreign forces, but also for certain ideology. So that this contradiction will be there. And I think probably that will be quite challenging for Taliban government. But I think about other cities, what I am hearing from people, is that situation is quite normal, like in in other cities.
That it's not as bad as the incidents that we're seeing.
Absolutely.
Zahid, I have to say thank you. We're at the end of our time here at the U.S. Arab Radio Ray Hanania show, brought to you by Arab News. Zahid Hussain, Arab News columnist and opinion writer, great writer too. You got to look up his stuff at arabnews.com. Zahid, thank you so much for joining us. It was a real pleasure, very informative.
Thank you, Ray, for having
All right,
me.
everybody, we'll
Really
be back.
enjoyed it.
Thank you. We'll be back next Wednesday at 8 a.m. Eastern Time here at the U.S. Arab Radio Network, brought to you by Arab News newspaper. I'm Ray Hanania. Have a great week, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.